inaugural season, week one recap show. My name is Asylum. I'm your host, and with me today are my colleagues Mad Catter, Strom, and Dorn. How are you all?
All right, pretty good,
Good.
pretty good.
Yeah, I'm kind of tired, but let's get this going.
All right. Well, hopping right into the league, the first game that we had this week was the Kislev versus the High Elves. Um, the Kislev won that game 2-0, and it was a fairly eventful game. What can you guys tell me about it?
Well, as the coach of the Kislev team, I can tell you that not an it was not a walk in the park to get that 2-0 victory. Um, it was a pretty hot day out. My Kislev, coming from the cold north, were not used to it, especially the bear. That bear passed out from the sun a number of times. It was a good game. The elves they fought well.
So you bring up weather being an issue. Uh, do you think that is an isolated incident, or do you think weather will be an issue going forward?
Weather is always an issue. Um, it could be raining, could be snowing, could be hot as hell. Yeah, Mother Nature likes to play Blood Bowl with the rest of us.
Now, when you have players out, positioning becomes a big issue for all teams, obviously. What can you all tell me about the positioning of that game?
Starting out, uh, before any character or players were actually out of that, the big thing that I noticed was Skilfer's initial positioning. He went with a very wide setup, which ultimately, with elves, you need a lot of screening, and he did not, kicking off the ball, he did not set up that for defense. I think that allowed Strom to really push forward once he had his once that bear got that ball. Um, so that's the key thing that I saw was the early on defensive positioning, and then from there on just battling it out when they started losing players, to injuries and heat stroke. You just have to, you gotta, they had to shuffle things around and make best of what bad situations they had.
So, with that being
Yeah, I also agree that Skilfer's defense uh, was definitely a little suboptimal. It definitely let me make holes easier than I would have expected.
said, the Kislev did score about midway through, maybe a little half past midway through the first half. Was positioning really a factor in that? Do you think it made it a little bit easier, left the door open for an early score, which might have changed the tone of the game going forward?
Um, Generally against elves, early scoring, they're not too put off by. They have the agility and the speed to run the ball up real far, real quick. Um, but the positioning, I think, was what allowed me to stop them from capitalizing on their ability to really run the ball up real far, real quick, and reduce their passing game.
Interesting. Now, Katter, you alluded to the bear having the ball for the Kislev. It is not often that you see a big guy running with the ball. Uh, do you think that might be a strategy going forward, or what are your thoughts on big guys with the ball?
General rule of thumb on the big guys with the ball is do not give the big guys the ball. But if you do, and you can get them to score. Uh, the the uh, the Bears, he actually can handle the ball. Not only can he tie up, can blitz and brutalize his way up the line if done right, but at the same time you're losing that blocker, that key blocker that you need, that. So it's kind of a 50-50 in my mind, but generally do not give the big guys the ball because he can be utilized in much better positioning,
I
especially the bear.
wholeheartedly, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I would not have given the Bear the ball if it weren't the first game in the league and it wasn't a touchback. I did want to get that Bear some star player points to get him a level up. Give him the necessary skills earlier on, rather than relying on a lucky MVP nomination or just maiming people. But yeah, it was a gamble and it didn't pay off, but it didn't hurt too bad.
And I gotta say, working or not makes me kind of jealous. I got, my team. We got three big dudes, and none of them can handle a ball if their life depended on it. So,
Or
hey,
unlife.
yeah, yeah, or lack thereof of living.
So, a big topic that was thrown around is ball handling, and that actually leads us to our next game in the slate, Chaos versus Lizardmen. Lizardmen taking that game 1-0. Catter, you are the coach of the Lizardmen. What can you tell us about the importance of ball handling in that game?
Always handle your balls. I mean, I jest. I
I always
jest.
do.
No, the importance of ball handling. It. I'm at a loss here
It
because
cannot be
there you go.
understated how difficult other players can make you picking the ball up become. And even when you would normally think that you have a really good shot, or you've even picked up the ball in worse odds, sometimes an enemy player can really just make it hell to pick up that ball, which is what happened in that game, where in the second half, the Lizardmen and the Chaos, they spent a long time trying to get that ball up off the ground, only to have interference from the opposing team.
A good half of that half was trying to pick up the ball, and that was so frustrating for both coaches. Uh, but the big takeaway from that is uh, you got to get in the right position to actually pick up the ball. If you're trying to pick up the ball and you have two, the more people you have around that ball of the opposing team, the lower your pickup percentage is, and the more likely you are to fumble the ball. And we used up our rerolls pretty quickly in that second half, trying to control that ball, and it was not happening.
Now, and you all make very good points. You know, if you have trouble picking up the ball, you start losing your turns. Lost turns equals a shorter game, and that affects your game plan. Um, from what you all saw from that game, do you think the game plans were there for each side, or do you think that there might have been a little bit of panic because of such a shortened game due to all the fumbles?
Well, I don't know. I can't, you claim to be inside of the coaches' heads there, but from when I was watching the game, it seemed like that Catter had a good, solid plan going throughout the game, and he pretty much stuck to that plan. But it looked like Galen didn't have a solid plan. He was wavering a bit, and couldn't really decide on what to do when. And it didn't seem like he had a plan until it was too late.
But once it was too late, he started bashing those skinks and then knocking those skinks out, and that it was already too late score wise, but it prevented me from doing an easy one to two touchdown score. Coupled with the ball handling, the fumbles that we were talking about earlier, it made that second half kind of dragging out.
Yeah, if he had focused those
A
skinks
lot of
down
injuries.
from the beginning, then it would have been a much different game for him.
Well, and on top of that, it would also have to do with, say, positioning and marking opponents because if the less people on that line of scrimmage there in the first half at the beginning, uh, marking as many of those skinks as it got around could have prevented that touchdown from the first half.
Well, it's hard to
Well,
mark skinks. They have dodge and stunty. They pretty much have the run of the place whenever they want. So
And
it's
but
hard
you
to
can
stop
still
them.
you can still make it a little bit more difficult for them to go through.
Yeah, hard
and
does not
Positioning
mean you should
wise,
give up on it.
right? Positioning wise, Galen left the left flank, or I guess it would have been my left flank. He left it pretty wide open on that first half, which allowed me to get a Saurus behind his line, and from there he forgot to mark that Saurus. He had it right on the. He could have potentially surfed the Saurus, but instead he left the Saurus standing there on the sideline, ready to pick up take out his ball carrier pretty much, and from there that ultimately led to me scoring in the first half.
and
It can
you
never
make
be underestimated how important it is to set up a surf and go and follow through it, even if it may not be directly helpful to getting your ball across the pitch. It can really save your butt in the later half of the game.
and you a good point was brought up. Marking players. If you could elaborate a little more on the importance of marking players, it seems like that was a big uh, item of contention in that game.
Well,
Yeah. So the basics behind marking players is to just stand one of your guys next to one of your opponent's guys, and that has the benefit of disallowing and making it harder for them to move away. Because if they spend time knocking your dude over that's marking them, then they can't move. And if they try and move without knocking your dude over, then it's possible that they can get tripped, and then that'll give your team the advantage.
Dorn, you had something to say?
yeah, and more on top of that, it's the aspect of it in keeping up with the marking. It might seem almost mediocre at times, but certain situations, it's important. You got to keep up with it. If you lose, your head, if you forget who's marked, who's where, anything in that situation, you can easily lose track of everything and unintentionally just throw away whatever a glimpse of a victory you might have had.
So, with that said, uh, we're actually going to lead into the next game on our slate. The Humans, uh, led by Sh- Shmoopy, versus the Kemri, led by you, Dorn. Uh,
Yes.
and that was a 2-0 victory for the Humans, which some would call maybe a small upset. Uh, what can you tell us about that game? From what I hear, it was the bloodiest game of the week. Lots of fists thrown, and basically 16 turns of punching.
It was the game of the
Um.
week.
Yes, it was very, very brutal. It was very, very hot that day. There were a couple players, only a couple, who had to sit out in that second half. However, Camry, their bones, they're not going to get overheat too bad. Humans, a lot more resilient than I gave them credit for, in every aspect. Um, Especially with that ogre, wearing that number one, the butt destroyer. He did just that. That entire game came down to getting the ball and then ending in just a giant brawl of basically, at a minimum, a 7 versus 7 just fight over the ball. And it constantly boiled down to who had who had the better positioning, I would say, but it was bad. It was very bloody, very brutal. A lot of my players suffered injuries. However, they regenerate. Their skeletons, their bones get fixed. They put themselves back together. But those humans, they're faster and tankier and beefier and can hit a lot harder than apparently my giant Tomb Guardians can. Um, in every aspect except until I killed one of those puny little humans.
So, when you have a big brawl like that, how do you protect the ball? How do you keep teams from picking up and kind of sneaking out the back door of a brawl and just getting into open field?
Well, I was unable to do that, so I don't think I'm fit to answer that.
Generally, it's knowing who to punch when. The order of punching is very important in a big muck like that. When a big ruckus happens, you gotta take out a few key people, and you just gotta get lucky.
Katter, do you have anything to say about the about protecting the ball in a big scrum?
Yeah, uh, like what Strom just said is knowing who can do what can really affect who can pick up the ball. A lot of times you can position somebody to block into another player, to block into another player, to block into another player, which can lead to a blitz to clear up the field, so you can pick up the ball with another player and then get away from that dog pile pretty much. And it's tough getting out of that. I mean, if you watch that match, a lot of times they were all centered around that ball, and battling out of that situation was not an easy thing for either team. So there is that.
So, after a shocking humans 2-0 victory, uh, a couple days later, uh, sources tell me that there were issues going on with the Orcs versus Goblins matchup. Asylum student being the coach of the Orcs and Captain Nemo being coach of the Goblins. It seemed that the Bombardier was blowing up more than just people on the field. Uh, Sources from the league tell me that there was a bit of an issue with the graphics and gameplay on the field. Uh, the commission has put down a ruling to give the Orcs a 2-1 victory, uh, and that from this point forward, Bombardiers are not to be played on the field. We will keep you updated with anything that happens with that. Uh, so, a fairly uneventful. Uh, uh, there wasn't necessarily game played. There were multiple attempts at it. It just didn't work out. Orcs over Goblins 2-1, which leads us to the standings of the league. After week 1, we have 4 undefeated teams. The Kislev Circus, coached by Strom. The Humans, coached by Shimopi, the Orcs, coached by Asylum Student, and the Lizardmen, coached by Mad Catter. From those four teams, who do you think might be the strongest looking one at this time?
That's a good question. I think, in my opinion, looking at the teams, at the moment, the uh, the my team, the Kids of Circus, has the highest team value, but I'm actually thinking that if played right, the Lizardmen might have an advantage over the other teams at the moment. They don't have any serious injuries, and their players are pretty hardy.
Right. I think even with that blitzer down on Schmoopy's team, I think if he plays his cards right, he can actually do some serious damage later in the not necessarily this next game. Well, actually, in this next game, he can do some damage, which would set him up to being one of the top teams in the league, just by how I saw him. Saw that team being coached.
I would have to say, experiencing all of that firsthand, saying regardless that the Schmoopy is now down a player, he definitely has control with his big guy already being leveled up and being awarded guard. That will make any fight against his team a hindrance in the future. And I think going forward, he will be potentially the biggest threat.
So humans and Coach Schmoopy seeming to be the upstart team early this season. Um, Now on the bottom half of the league ladder, we have the Goblins, coached by Nemo, Chaos, coached by Galen, High Elves, coached by Skilfer, and Kemri, currently bottom of the board, coached by Udorn. Which team do you think has the biggest likelihood of turning it around this season? In this early season?
Ooh, I would have to tie it between the Kemri team and Skilfer's High Elves.
I
I think
agree
I
with
would
that.
agree with that. I think Skillford's High Elves have a slight advantage over your Kemri, Dorn, depending on how many risks Skillford is willing to take. And if experience has taught me anything, Skillford is willing to take an absurd amount of risks.
Right, but just purely for the short term, he is
Yeah, well,
down
that
a
was not a
player.
positive I was talking about.
Ah.
Yeah. His next game is actually against my Lizardmen, so it's going to be an interesting fight on that. I think he's down a player as well. Uh, definitely down a player. Um, so he'll have that reserve player, that free reserve player to replace it. But yeah,
Yeah, but they're journeymen for a reason.
So, with that being said, let's get into our next week's matchups. Uh, for week 2 of the league. We'll start and we'll let you, the panel, uh, give your thoughts and predictions for the games. And the first one we have on the slate is Lawful Good, the chaotic team coached by Galen versus Clan Thrust Plunder, coached by Asylum Student. What do you think is going to go on with that match?
I'll start this with since I played Galen that last match. Um, the key to this game is going to be who keeps a level head. Uh, and I think if Galen can keep himself a level head and have a plan going in, it's going to be a bashy game, and no way around it. Somebody's either going to get seriously injured, or seriously, is going to die, if not multiple people, multiple players. The key to that game is definitely who keeps a level head and keeps that game plan in play. And I have a feeling that Clan Thrust Plunder is going to come out of this one with a 1-0 victory.
Yeah, I have to agree with Catter. Whoever keeps a level head, because it's going to be a bashy game. That entire game is going to be a 16-turn just muck. It's going to be elbows and fists and claws. Galen certainly has the advantage on strength over Clan Thrust Plunder. However, Clan Thrust Plunder has a blitzer or two, and putting that block skill in key places can really turn the tide. But make no mistake, that's going to be a punching game.
Yes. Recently coming out of a great brawl, I'm I'm either gonna say it's gonna come out being a 1-1 or it's gonna come out 0-2 in favor of Clan Thrust Plunder. Which in any case, all the power to whoever. I agree with it's gonna be bashy and who can keep a level head, but when it gets super bashy, it's more of certain situations. It boils down to who can just grab the ball and peel faster. Um, and that's pretty 50-50 either way.
So, seems like the consensus is it's going to be a physical, it's going to be a violent game that will either end up in a draw or a very small margin of victory for Clan Thrust Plunder. Our next game on the docket is the High Elves, Bastard of Uruk, coached by Skilfer, versus the Cold-Blooded Root Beer of Catter and his Lizard Men. Catter, since you are coaching this game, we will skip you for your for your prediction, and we'll start with Strom.
This is going to be an interesting game. If Skilfer can dance around the Saurus and bash up the Skinks, I think he has the game in the bag. Guaranteed victory. If Catter can force him to deal with those Saurus, then it can be a real tight game. But if Skilfer can get around those Saurus and the Kroxigor, then I think that Skilfer might have this game in the bag.
I gotta say that, especially since Skilfer's team is down a player and the way he plays, I think it's definitely going to be in favor of Cold-Blooded Root Beer, and it's either the Lizardman team will be winning by a large margin, or it'll be a very slim one, and that boils down to if Skilfer can make up for his lack of a player.
Hey, he's only lost a lineman. He didn't lose a positional.
So. Well, but the way he plays, he uses about every unit the same except for throwers. They have throwers.
Yeah, and that's going to be another advantage on his side, the ability to throw the ball.
Definitely. I'm going to comment on here, even though you guys are skipping me. I think that, I'm not going to give a prognostication, but on these two coaches, myself and Skilfer, we are pretty much the two coaches that I've seen so far that take are known for taking extreme risks. So that's going to play a factor as well. So I just want to throw that out there.
Hoping for a lot of turnovers.
I must say this matchup is a very one way or the other kind of game. If the High Elves can make the space and air it out, I can see them running all over these Lizardmen. But Catter's a savvy coach, and he will do his best to turn it into a draggy, gut it out 1-0, 2-1 kind of victory. Um, Ultimately, I think it comes down to who does take the most risks, and I think the High Elves will steal this game late in the second half. I'll say 2-1 going towards the Bastards of Uruk. Now, our next team, or our next game, I should say, is Basic Team, the startup human squad, coached by Shamupi, versus the stupid stunties, coached by Captain Nemo.
This one's going to be a fun game. I'm looking forward to this one because I think the human's bane will be the stuntiness of the goblins. Goblins have two big guys to deal with. Um,
Well,
that
Nemo,
can go in their go against them, but
well, I think it's a more of a hindrance in this because Shmubi has already shown that versus multiple big guys, he has no problem. Right in his first game, he versus the Camry with 3 big guys who don't even have. Their only negative is their slow movement, not that they're unreliable. And that turned into a what was it, a 2-0 victory?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think the big guys are going to be an issue for Shmoopy, but I do agree that the combination of dodge and stunty and the secret weapons especially, that's going to play a huge role.
You know, uh, I would agree everything with what you said, Strom, and especially with uh, how much I know about how Nemo works and how he thinks about things. I would the only way I think the stupid stunties are going to tie it or win is if this he can successfully use the secret weapons to take out specific players. So, for instance, if he can manage to stick a chainsaw in the ogre's gut, then that might be the only way he can get something done. Or if he can make that pogo jump all the way through the end zone. I think those are the only ways he's going to be able to get to win.
well, again, the stunties have if he plays it right, they have the advantage of being able to pretty much dodge around his line with the ball in hand and run it into the end zone fairly easily. If they're even if they're marked, they can get out of those situations. So I'm
Oh yeah,
actually going to
absolutely.
I'm going to give this one. Again, this is going to be a 1-0 victory for the stupid stunties.
I agree. I think it's going to be a 1-0 victory for either one. Whichever one wins, it's going to be 1-0.
Um, I'm gonna say the stunties on paper are just the more dangerous team, I think, in terms of scoring and getting ahead. But that stunty, all it takes is one hit, and then you get an injury, you get uh, a KO or a death, and then the numbers game, I think the humans can take better advantage of. Um, I think it comes down to, can in the first 3 turns the humans get a key block, a key injury, a key kill to turn the tide of the game and make the stunty team fear combat even more so than they already do. Uh, I think the upstart human teams takes another victory, 1-0, turns it into a brawly match, gets a couple kills, gets a couple injuries, and really establishes themselves on top of the leaderboard.
I agree with that, but the other possibility is Shmupi could beat Nemo at the own game of running around. I mean, that's how Shmoop won. Against me, he was brawly and managed to run that ball, as fast as he could and dodge as many issues as possible. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
It's gonna be probably the most eventful match of the week. But
it's definitely Shmoopy has definitely come out a relative newcomer to the game, and not everyone, no one had any expectations, and he came out swinging, both literally and
Literally.
figuratively.
And that brings
yeah,
us
that he
to
did.
our final game of the week, the 2B8s, coached by
Toomey aches. Say it correctly.
2B8s. God damn it.
Toomey aches.
Sigh.
Yes.
Still a good fun.
We are the Toomey aches.
Coached by uh, Dorn versus the Cirque du Glace of Strom and his Kislev Circus. The two of you are involved in this game, so we will skip your uh, your predictions. Katter, what do you think of this game?
Oh, this is going to be the game that oh, the words I have for this game. The Kislev and their ability to jump the line, jump cages, get. It's just I haven't played them much, but what I've seen of them, they can be probably one of the most dangerous teams out there. And Strom has the rerolls to make them a threat. Um, Toomey Aches, nobody leveled up last game. I
Yeah, they
don't
did.
think. Oh, you had some levels up. All right.
Akhenaten leveled up and obtained Mighty Blue.
Okay.
I have no level ups on my team.
What's that?
I have no level ups on my team. Everyone's still
I didn't
level
think
1.
so. So that that mighty blow can help out, but ultimately in the end, I think the speed and the agility of the Kislev are just going to tear apart the undead, the Khemri there. No ifs or ifs, ands, or buts. I think that's how it's going to happen. It's going to be probably I'm predicting a 3-1 victory.
3-1. Wow.
Yeah.
3-1 for who?
I don't know.
Sorry.
I don't know what to expect from it, but
What it was 3
Kislev
to 1
have less armor than humans. That's all I'm gonna say.
Wait, it was 3-1 for Kislev?
For Kislev, yeah.
Um Knowing these two coaches have battled it out before, and it has been there is some familiarity between the two. Uh Again, this feels like the Lizardmen versus High Elf kind of thing, where if it becomes a drag out brawl, uh, the Khemri have the upper hand, and if it becomes kind of an up and down kind of game, it's the Kislev. Uh, I think familiarity uh, helps the Khemri team right now. I think once you see what Leap can do, you prepare a little bit better for it. And I think Doran and his Khemri team will pull it out 2-1 is my prediction for that. And is there something you want to say?
Yeah, I knowing my opponent and the team, I'm not sure who's gonna win, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be someone is not going to score. I think it's gonna be a 1-0 or 2-0 game.
And we will, it won't be long before we find out all of our predictions. And that leads us to the next part of the wrap up, death count for the week. We had an impressive
Ooh.
3 deaths this week. 2 of them, this is not
No, we had an
including
impressive 5 deaths this
well,
week.
Yes.
no, we had 3 confirmed deaths, and then 2 very knowledgeable apothecaries were able to save some lives.
No,
Well,
one
Putting those
no,
regenerate.
a
vines back
regeneration,
in.
a regeneration, and a
Oh,
apothecary
it's one.
save some
All
lives.
right. My sources were
So,
incorrect.
That's okay. You can burn them when they come back to you.
I
Yes,
plan to.
I sat there and watched my skeleton, mend its own bones back together.
I'm sure the sounds were sickening.
Oh, very much.
Gloriously
You
so.
know,
I
two
think the
two of those deaths happened in my match, and that was pretty gruesome. Akhenaten totally destroyed that man, and in
that blitzer.
retaliation, the Blitzer, he was
It
too
took a
weak to be
big
named.
loss to Schmoopy's team.
It was. However, retaliation trying to take out the skeleton osteosarcoma, otherwise known as bone cancer. Um, he still managed to get back up. He will suffer one more match at least.
Didn't he have like a niggling injury or something like that?
No. I had 6 injuries that match, and the only one who did not regenerate from their injury has a movement allowance.
I think it was Lil Peep, was it not?
No, I think it was your mom.
Oh, I think it is your mom. Yes.
I think. Oh, yeah, it was your mom.
As
Sigh.
we can tell, colorful names in this league. But
Yes, yes.
that is it for the.
Well, I mean, we didn't talk about the great Tigu and his just decimation. I mean, if you watch that animation when he killed Galen's Beastman, there
I'm
it was
pretty sure Great Tegu actually took a bite out of that Beastman on its
oh
way out of the pitch.
oh definitely. I mean, it was it was bloody. So. And in that match there's also the one of my sources also killed another one of his beastmen, but that's where that apothecary save came in. We had no like long-term injuries on either side, so besides that death.
The longest term of injury.
Well, it's actually the shortest term of injury. It's just the most final one.
Are there any other deaths to be accounted
Oh,
for?
go ahead and talk about your game there, Strong.
So, in my game, on the way that one of the my catchers, I believe, was on his way to his second touchdown. The a hero elf, and by hero I mean dumbass, went to go and do a last-ditch effort to put that catcher down, and you know what? To his credit, he did his own thing. He made it through multiple dodge zones, got right up to my catcher, and then fell and broke his neck.
It was an awesome sight.
It was tragic for the elves.
Well, as we know,
As a coach, I almost died laughing at that point. I'm just throwing that out there.
I did die laughing. It was very funny.
as
Then
we
you
Only
use
know,
your
elves could
apothecary.
regenerate.
sometimes the most devastating thing on the pitch is the field itself. Uh, and if that wraps up the death report for week 1, that in turn wraps up the week 1 recap of the NCBBL inaugural season. Thank you so much, you guys. I will hand it over to Catter to speak about the Open League, which, to what I know, has been very eventful. This is Asylum, thanking Catter, Strom, and Dorn for their time. And I will see you all next week.
All right.